Unit 7 Disasters, Toxic Hazards, and Pollution. 7.0 Introduction. Disasters are a complex worldwide crisis. It is an inevitable truth of nature, which cannot be prevented, only managed. Every year, millions of individuals and hundreds of communities get affected by different types of disasters all around the world. Such a crisis situation not only impacts their physical health and surroundings, but also disrupts their mental health and well-being. Global economic and social development is frequently deterred by natural and man-made disasters. Further, developing countries are more prone to profound damage inflicted by disasters and environmental hazards. This is due to the various challenges such countries face, like extreme hunger and poverty, resource crunch, poor educational facilities, lack of infrastructure, unavailability of skilled manpower, lack of awareness and limited knowledge of disaster mental health. In this unit, we expand our understanding on the meaning, characteristics and causes of natural disasters. Perception, effects and theoretical perspectives on disasters will be introduced. Finally, the roles and functions of various stakeholders in disaster management will be discussed. 7.1 Natural disasters. 7.1.1 Definition and characteristics. We are all familiar with environmental calamities that result in excessive property destruction, human life loss, or both. Untold human agony has been brought by earthquakes, tornadoes, floods, fires, storms, and avalanches. Although disasters caused by naturally occurring phenomena usually have minimal human involvement, there are moments when natural events and our impact on the environment intersect. A disaster is anything that has extremely bad implications for individuals who are impacted by it and is caused by the interaction of natural and societal events. This definition recognizes that a natural event is only a disaster if it has an impact on humans. A natural disaster is a major calamity caused by the Earth's natural processes. Characteristics of natural disasters. Natural disasters are distinguished by the following characteristics: they occur suddenly. They are usually unpredictable, and even when we have some advance notice, we do not always know when the event will occur or what will happen. They are out of control. They are incredibly powerful. They are frequently acute, meaning they last only a few minutes rather than days. Some examples of natural disasters are tornadoes, severe storms, hurricane, tropical storms, floods, wildfires, earthquakes, droughts, volcanic eruption, tsunami, and landslide. 7.1.2 Categories of natural disasters. The natural disaster category is generally divided into 6 groups of disasters, namely, biological, geophysical, meteorological, hydrological, climatological, and extraterrestrial. A biological disaster. Biological disasters are natural events that result in widespread disease, disability, or death among humans, animals, and plants as a result of microorganisms such as bacteria, viruses, or poisons. Examples are dengue, malaria, meningitis, HIV, bird flu, swine flu, cholera, etc. B. Geophysical disasters. They are potentially damaging natural events and or phenomena that may cause the loss of life or injury, property damage, social and economic disruption, or natural degradation. Extreme natural hazards are pre-manifestation of the complex, hierarchical and nonlinear Earth systems. Examples are volcanic eruption, earthquakes, landslides, mudflows, etc. C. Meteorological disasters. These are caused by extreme weather such as rain, drought, snow, extreme heat or cold, ice or wind. Examples of weather disasters embrace blizzards, cyclones, hailstorms, heat waves, hurricanes, floods, and tornadoes. Hydrological disasters. A hydrological disaster is a violent, sudden, and destructive change either in the quality of Earth's water or in the distribution of the movement of water on land, below the sea level or in the atmosphere. Examples are floods, limnic eruptions, eruption of carbon dioxide present in the deep waters of a lake that creates gas cloud, puddle, landslides. Climatological disasters. These are events that are brought about by drastic fluctuations of the climate states and variabilities. Or, these are a phenomenon that is a result of climate fluctuations that shift outside of their normal state to different factors that impact the climate. Examples are El Niño, Southern Oscillation, La Niña, enhanced greenhouse effect, climate change, acid deposition, ozone depletion. Extraterrestrial disasters. These are hazards caused by asteroids, meteorites, and comets as they pass near Earth, enter the Earth's atmosphere, and forward/or strike the Earth. They cause changes in interplanetary conditions that affect the Earth's magnetosphere, ionosphere, and thermosphere. Examples are meteorites, interstellar dust, explosion from comets, nuclear accidents in space. 7.1.3 Causes of natural disasters. Earthquakes, flooding, volcanic eruptions, landslides, hurricanes, and other natural calamities can all contribute to a natural disaster. To be classified as a disaster, it must have a significant environmental impact, as well as human loss and, in many cases, financial loss. Natural disasters are caused by natural events such as extreme weather conditions or movements of the Earth's surface that tend to be localized in certain areas of the world, and they are remembered vividly because of their dramatic nature. For example, hurricanes form over moisture-rich oceans and coastlines, such as the Atlantic Ocean, Caribbean Sea, and the Gulf of Mexico, whereas earthquakes occur along fault lines in the Earth's crust. Avalanches of snow or excessive rainfall leading to flooding can also cause disasters. The magnitude of the disaster may be exacerbated by human intervention in some areas, but humans are not directly responsible for the events. Soil erosion, seismic activity, tectonic movements, air pressure, and ocean currents, among other factors, all contribute to natural disasters. The main causes of these disasters are natural activities occurring in the Earth's crust as well as on the surface. 7.2 Perception and effects of natural disasters. Perception of natural hazards and disasters involve intuitive judgments, beliefs, and attitudes adopted by individuals and groups of people about the likelihood and occurrence, and mechanism of development of such phenomenon. The subjective nature of the understanding of natural hazards influences people's decisions. Risk perception is influenced by many factors which are firstly related to the nature of the hazard itself and secondly to psychological, social, and cultural components and their mutual interactions. In the case of natural hazards, risk perception analysis has to take into account that they vary immensely from certain events such as flash floods, avalanches, or earthquakes to long-lasting phenomena such as heat waves and droughts. Most comparative studies focus on human-induced dangers, whereas risk perception of natural hazards has been researched less. Some limitations of human risk perceptions are related to psychological mechanisms. Natural disasters may cause unpleasant feelings of anxiety and lack of sense of security. For this reason, each individual's emotional and psychological traits have an impact on their perception. Effects of natural disasters. Natural disasters generally affect the physical infrastructural facilities, agricultural productivity, and even lead to loss of life and cause property damage. Various factors influence the effects that are disastrous for a country, like the magnitude of the disaster and geographic location of the affected area and recovery efforts directed towards reducing immediate effects of a disaster. Failure to mitigate various short-term economic effects of a disaster affects the long-term economy of the country. The primary effects are direct results of a natural disaster such as collapsed buildings and waste damage. Secondary effects are the result of primary effects. The effect of natural disasters is both short-term, including loss of life and damage to property, and long-term, affecting the economic stability of a region or a country. 7.3 Environmental theories and disasters. Over the centuries there have been 4 fundamental theories about the disaster, which have conceived disasters as acts of fate / acts of God, acts of nature, joint effects of nature and society, and social construction, respectively. Let us explore them. Acts of fate / acts of God. For millennia, disasters were considered to arise from impersonal and uncontrollable sources, either from unfortunate alignments of stars and planets or acts of God that were beyond human understanding. Both forms of this theory viewed disasters as predetermined and thus completely beyond the victim's control. A variation on this theory was that disasters were cosmic or divine retribution for human failings, personal disasters for personal failings, and collective disasters for societal failings. Acts of nature. Over time, increased scientific knowledge led many people to substitute natural causes for supernatural ones. Thus floods occur because of a large amount of rainfall from a serious form exceeded capacity to absorb it. Accordingly, the term natural disaster came to refer to an outside attack upon social systems that broke down in the face of such assaults. Joint effects of nature and society. It was proposed that hazards arise from the interaction of a physical event system and human use system. Thus, it takes both the hazardous event system and the vulnerable human use system to produce disaster. According to this view, human societies adapt to the prevailing environmental conditions, e.g. temperature, wind speed, precipitation, seismic activities, at a given location. Unfortunately, they fail to anticipate the variations in those environmental conditions. Consequently, their adaptation to normal conditions usually is inadequate for extreme events: blizzards, heat waves, tornadoes, hurricanes, and floods. Social constructions. Most recently, researchers have recognized that disasters are quite systematic in the types of people they harm as well as the type of geographical location and use systems they impact. While the interactive theory is concerned with hazard exposure at specific locations and physical vulnerability of specific structures, the social construct theory calls attention to the social vulnerability of specific population segments. To say that hazard vulnerability is socially constructed does not mean that people are vulnerable because they think the wrong thoughts, as most people would categorize the belief that floods are caused by alignments of planets and stars. Rather, socially vulnerable population segments emerge because their psychological, demographical, economical, and political processes tend to produce them. 7.4 Technological catastrophes. A technological disaster or catastrophe is an event caused by a malfunction of a technological structure and / or some human error in controlling or handling the technology. Technological disasters are classified as man-made catastrophes since they have an identifiable cause feature. As a result of this trait, the impact on communities is frequently more negative. The consequences of a tragedy on families and people can be long-lasting and persist for years. Symptoms, on the other hand, may arise gradually and the effects may not be seen right away. Bhopal gas tragedy can be considered to be an example of a technological disaster. It occurred in December 1984 in Bhopal and still terrorizes people because toxic methyl isocyanate leaked from the Union Carbide factory. The gas spread out silently, engulfing the highly inhabited neighborhoods surrounding the factory. People awoke gasping for air and dashed outside, only to inhale more of the lethal gas. Many people perished while sleeping, while others became blind. Several people developed post-traumatic ailments over time, and many continue to do so now. This was one of the deadliest chemical disasters in history, with over 10,000 people killed and over 5.5 million people afflicted and suffering from excruciating injuries. The catastrophe occurred as a result of human error and poor manufacturing supervision. Unfortunately, numerous industries in India continue to operate with little government pressure on the implementation of safety standards as spelled out by the authorities in their standard operating procedures. Box 7.1 Chernobyl disaster is one of the worst nuclear disasters that occurred in the Chernobyl nuclear power station in the erstwhile Soviet Union on April 25 and 26, 1986. Human mistakes combined with others, resulted in several massive explosions. Many people contracted radiation sickness and many of them succumbed to radiation-induced illnesses as well as cancer in the long term. Large amount of radioactive material was released into the atmosphere, millions of acres of forests were destroyed, livestock were born with deformities, and humans suffered negative impact on both their physical and mental health. Such incidents highlight about the decision-making process and its related consequences. Technological disasters can be further subdivided into industrial chemical spills, collapse, explosion, fire, gas leak, poisoning, radiation, and others. Transport: air, rail, road, water, miscellaneous accidents, fire, collapse, explosion, and others. 7.4.1 Effects of technological disasters. Technological disasters are especially stressful because they are unpredictable. Individuals, families, and communities are affected. Some of the results include income loss, loss of job security, uncertainties about the future, family conflict, and stress. Several publications were generated in the aftermath of several disasters in the mid-1980s, which began to pinpoint the implications for individuals. It became clear that there were unanticipated effects. Following a traumatic occurrence, shock, sadness, and psychological disruption are to be expected. However, researchers at the Institute of Psychiatry in London, such as James Thompson, revealed two major surprising findings. To begin with, psychological effects were not always instantaneous and generally did not manifest until several months following the occurrence, which might be as long as 9 to 12 months in certain circumstances. Second, the repercussions were comparable to and as severe for personnel on the scene as they were for direct survivors who had been directly involved in the incident. The latter result led to the understanding that delayed, severe, and long-term impacts were both prevalent and routine for workers involved in lesser incidents, such as road traffic accidents. This has far-reaching ramifications for emergency personnel's training and support systems. Indeed, it is now widely acknowledged that simply viewing disaster coverage on television or being aware of terrible events in one's neighborhood can cause psychological anguish. What is evident is that disasters affect a significant number of people. These consequences are not restricted to large-scale events, and we do not know the full scope of these effects. Furthermore, it became evident, at least in the United Kingdom, that rescue services and psychological support services were not fully prepared to deal with such widespread trauma. Attempts to comprehend and cope with the psychological response to catastrophes, as well as attempts to understand the causes of technical disasters and accidents in terms of human mistakes and person-machine interaction, provide psychological input. The literature has concentrated on three groups in order to understand the psychological impacts observed: survivors, bereaved, and employees involved at the scene. Much of what we know now comes from crisis response, where psychologists worked with people who had been involved in severe disasters. The Centre for Crisis Psychology in Yorkshire, directed by Peter Hodgkinson and Michael Stewart, has demonstrated such a response. These workers have supplied a wealth of knowledge based on their own experience, but clearly, there is still much more to be done. Those who survive disasters are commonly referred to as victims, and there are 2 points worth emphasizing about this term. First, it emphasizes the fact that the consequences are extreme, and that many people who lived through the event do not survive. To survive is to return to a relatively normal existence similar to that which existed before the disaster, and many people do not make it. Second, some researchers oppose to the term victim because it suggests helplessness and an incapacity to recover on the part of the person, and have instead suggested using the term catastrophe-impacted person, which has a less negative connotation. Robert J. Lifton, who interviewed some of the Hiroshima survivors retrospectively in 1967, is credited as being the first to study the psychological impact of disasters. According to Lifton, death imprint refers to a tendency to release the experience in vivid flashbacks, either awake or asleep, as if the imprint of the event has been indefinitely stamped on the mind, regret for living when others died, as well as guilt over not doing enough to save others. The repression of sentiments and emotions concerning the occurrence is referred to as a psychic number, as if a feeling has been fully switched off. The inclination to be furious and irritated with offers of aid that one believes others truly do not understand, as well as the isolation of one of the most powerful mediators of the process, social support, are referred to as nurture and conflicts. The desperate and continuous search for meaning, which contradicts completely the construction of reality, which is to some extent predictable, controllable, and with some degree of scrutiny after such an event, it is difficult to believe in anything. This quest can be positive if it leads to working through and acceptance of the event. Guidelines for coping with stress in the event of a technological disaster. Individuals need to take the following steps: maintain as much of a routine as possible. Reduce the amount of media coverage of the event. Maintain a healthy lifestyle and discover healthy ways to relieve stress, such as going outside, exercising, and completing stress-relieving exercises. To have a better understanding of the situation, look for reliable sources of information. Speak with someone you can trust. Maintain an optimistic attitude, you will get through this. If you are sad, nervous, or having difficulties controlling your emotions, seek professional treatment. The following steps need to be taken by couples. Talk about what they are going through with each other. Please be patient with one another. If you lose your job, talk about how you will pay your bills and make a plan. If the relationship is too stressful, seek counseling. The effect of any crisis on children is largely determined by how adults in the household react. Parents are recommended to do the following to help children cope with stress: limit the exposure to disaster coverage on television. Answer all inquiries a youngster may have honestly and in a language that a child can understand. Maintain a positive attitude and concentrate on how things will improve. When it comes to children, know when to seek expert aid. Significant behavioral changes, especially those that endure for a long time, can indicate that a kid is having difficulties. 7.5 Toxic exposure from industries, occupations, and household wastes. Toxic industrial chemicals, including chlorine, phosgene, hydrogen sulfide, and ammonia, have variable effects on the respiratory tract and may be seen alone or in combination. Other toxins include the effects of cyanide, carbon monoxide, and fire suppressants. Toxic exposure is defined as the direct or indirect contact with any natural or man-made substances or agents that can lead to deleterious changes in body structure or function, including illness or death. Toxic materials may enter the body in different ways. These are called the routes of exposure. The most common route of exposure is through inhalation. Toxic industrial materials are chemicals other than chemical warfare agents that have harmful effects on humans. Toxic industrial materials or chemicals are used in a variety of settings such as manufacturing facilities, maintenance areas, and general storage areas. Chemical waste is typically generated by factories, processing centers, warehouses, and plants. Household wastes, also known as domestic waste or residential waste, is disposable materials generated by households. This waste can be comprised of non-hazardous waste and hazardous waste. Non-hazardous waste can include food, scraps, paper, bottles, etc., which can be recycled or compost. Household hazardous waste and demolitions include motor oil, automobile batteries, paints and solvents, household cleaners, drain openers, pesticides, compressed gas tanks, such as propane and oxygen. Disposing of waste has a huge environmental impact and can cause serious problems. Some wastes will eventually rot, but not all, and in the process, it may smell or generate methane gas, which is explosive and contribute to the greenhouse effect. Leachate, produced as waste decomposes, may cause pollution. Industrial waste is defined as the waste generated by manufacturing or industrial processes. The types of industrial waste generated include cafeteria garbage, dirt and gravel, masonry and concrete, scrap metals, trash, oil, solvents, chemicals, weed grass and trees, wooden scraps, lumber and similar wastes. Occupational hazards are risks of illness or accidents in the workplace. In other words, hazards that workers experience in their place of work are called occupational hazards. It is something unpleasant that a person experiences or suffers as a result of doing their jobs. It also means risk. Poor waste management contributes to climate change and air pollution and directly affects many ecosystems and species. Landfills are considered as the last resort in waste hierarchy. They release methane, a very powerful greenhouse gas linked to climate change. Inefficient municipal solid waste management systems may also create serious negative environmental impacts like infectious diseases, land and water pollution, obstruction of drains, and loss of biodiversity. 7.6 Air pollution and behavior. Air pollution is the presence of substances in the atmosphere that are harmful to the health of humans and other living beings or cause damage to the climate or to materials. There are many different types of pollutants such as gases including ammonia, carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, methane, carbon dioxide, chlorofluorocarbons, particulates, both organic and inorganic, and biological molecules. Air pollution may cause diseases, allergies, and even death to humans. It may also cause harm to other living organisms, such as animals and food crops, and may damage the natural environment, for example, climate change, ozone depletion, or habitat degradation, or built environment, for example, acid rains. Both human activity and natural processes can generate air pollution. Air pollution is a significant risk factor for a number of pollution-related diseases, including respiratory infections, heart diseases, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, stroke, and lung cancer. Growing evidence suggests that air pollution exposure may be associated with reduced IQ scores, impaired cognition, increased risk for psychiatric disorders, such as depression, and detrimental perinatal health. Psychological and toxic effects of air pollution can lead to psychiatric symptoms including anxiety, and changes in mood, cognition, and behavior. Air pollution also impacts the level of stress. Studies have confirmed air pollution increases crime. Polluted air increases anxiety, which can, in turn, lead to a rise in criminal or unethical behavior. Studies have concluded that cities with high levels of air pollution had higher levels of crime. Further studies have confirmed that air pollution can contribute to annoyance, anxiety, depression, and general dissatisfaction with life. Pollution is also linked to substance abuse, self-harm, suicide, as well as crimes. 7.7 Role and functions of disaster management agencies in India. Various disaster management agencies play a pivotal role in the management of disasters when a disaster has occurred. Role of the Union Government. Even though the state government is primarily responsible for the management of the crisis and disaster, but the union or the central government plays an integral role in providing financial and physical resources, helping with complementary measures like early warnings, coordinating with different departments, and ministries and organizations. There is also a Cabinet Committee on Natural Calamities, at the highest level, that reviews the crisis at hand. There is a high-level committee of ministers that runs under the chairpersonship of the Agriculture Minister, and it mainly works with the issues related to financial support that is supposed to be provided to the state governments from the National Disaster Response Fund, in case the state governments do not having enough funds available to them. There is another committee, Cabinet Committee on Security, that handles matters related to biological, nuclear, and chemical emergencies. National Crisis Management Committee. The National Crisis Management Committee is led by the Cabinet Secretary, who is the senior executive officer. NCMC is made up of secretaries of important ministries and departments, as well as leaders of other organizations. It examines and monitors crisis circumstances regularly, and offers orders to the Crisis Management Group as needed. The NCMC has the authority to instruct any ministry, department, or organization to take a particular action in response to a crisis. Since disaster management is a multidisciplinary process, all central ministries and departments play an important role in disaster management. Due to the highly technical and specific character of many catastrophe occurrences, such as aviation disasters, rail accidents, chemical disasters, and biological disasters, among others, the ministries responsible for that topic have nodal responsibility for dealing with that sort of disaster. Nodal ministries / Department for Disaster Management at the national level, Droughts Ministry of Agriculture, 2. Epidemics and Biological Disasters Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, 3. Chemical or Industrial Chemical Disasters Ministry of Environment and Forest, 4. Nuclear Accidents Department of Atomic Energy, v. Railway Accidents Ministry of Railways, 6. Air Accidents Ministry of Civil Aviation, 7. Natural Disasters except for Drought and Epidemics and Civil Strife Ministry of Home Affairs. The secretaries of the Government of India's nodal ministries and departments, such as the Ministry of Home Affairs, Agriculture, Civil Aviation, Environment and Forests, Health, Atomic Energy, Space, Earth Sciences, Water Resources, Mines, Railways, and others, are all members of the National Executive Committee and serve as nodal agencies for specific disasters based on their core competencies or as assigned to them. The National Executive Committee, which is led by the Home Secretary, coordinates amongst several nodal ministries / departments. The NEC is responsible for developing a national disaster management strategy based on the National Disaster Management Policy. Box 7.2 National Disaster Management Authority, Government of India. The National Disaster Management Authority, headed by the Prime Minister of India, is the apex body for disaster management in India. Setting up of NDMA and the creation of an enabling environment for institutional mechanisms at the state and district levels is mandated by the Disaster Management Act, 2005. NDMA is mandated to lay down the policies, plans and guidelines for disaster management. India envisions the development of an ethos of prevention, mitigation, preparedness and response. The Indian government strives to promote a national resolve to mitigate the damage and destruction caused by natural and man-made disasters, through sustained and collective efforts of all government agencies, non-governmental organizations and people's participation. This is planned to be accomplished by adopting a technology-driven, proactive, multi-hazard and multi-sectoral strategy for building a safer, disaster-resilient and dynamic India. It empowers all the stakeholders to improve the effectiveness of disaster management in India. Crisis Management Group. The Crisis Management Group is made up of nodal officers from many ministries with a stake in the outcome. Apart from CMG, the National Executive Committee, led by the Home Secretary, is responsible for the DM Act's statutory coordination and duties. The CMG's responsibilities include reviewing annual contingency plans formulated by various ministries, departments, and organizations in their respective sectors, coordinating the activities of the union ministries and state governments in relation to disaster preparedness and relief, and obtaining information from nodal officers on all of these issues. In the case of a disaster, the CMG meets often to monitor relief activities and gives all necessary support to the afflicted nations to help them overcome the crisis. Meetings with the resident commissioner of the concerned state are also held. Funding mechanism. Each state has a fund called the State Disaster Response Fund, which is managed by a state-level commission overseen by the state government's chief secretary. The amount of the corpus is calculated based on the state's usual expenditure on relief and rehabilitation during the previous 10 years. If the funds available via the State Disaster Response Fund are insufficient to fulfill the specific needs, state governments can seek help from the National Disaster Response Fund, which was established at the national level. Both of these programs are for relief and rehabilitation, as their names imply, and do not support mitigation or reconstruction, which must be paid independently by the state or national governments. Role of state government. In India, it is the state government's primary role to provide rescue, relief, and rehabilitation in the case of natural disasters. The whole system of crisis management in state governments has been geared for post-disaster assistance and rehabilitation since the outset. Relief commissioners are in charge of relief and rehabilitation initiatives in the majority of states. The majority of states have established a disaster management department with the necessary connections to the many developments and regulatory departments involved in the prevention, mitigation, and preparedness. Every state has a crisis management committee, chaired by the chief secretary and comprised of secretaries in charge of concerned departments, that reviews crises daily during a crisis, coordinates all departments' activities, and provides decision support to the district administration. A cabinet committee on natural calamities, chaired by the chief minister, takes stock of the situation and is responsible for all major policy decisions at the ministerial level. Role of district administration. The general administration of catastrophes in the district is the duty of the district magistrate/collector. Under the rules of the General Financial Rules/Treasury Codes, he can mobilize the response apparatus and has been given financial rights to draw money. During a disaster, all departments of the state government, including the police, fire services, public works, irrigation, and so on, work together under the direction of the collector, with the exception of metropolitan regions, where the municipal government plays a prominent role. The district collector also has the authority to ask the armed forces for help if the situation warrants it. In recent years, NGOs have proven to be helpful in providing relief, rescue, and rehabilitation. Role of local self-governments. Following the 73rd and 74th Amendments to the Constitution, local self-governments, both rural and urban, have arisen as key layers of governance. In addition to being intimately interwoven with the community, they are also the closest administrative units and are among the first responders to any crisis. Under the general direction of the district administration, these units can thus play a significant role in crisis management. Role of NGO/civil society/media/public. In the event of a disaster, the local community is usually the first to respond. Traditional disaster management expertise and appropriate countermeasures are also carried by the local community. As a result, with the support of non-governmental organizations, the media, and the role of the local community must be utilized. They are encouraged to take part in all three phases of disaster recovery. The district government also needs to focus on disaster management capacity building, involvement, and empowerment of these stakeholders. For a speedy, efficient, and effective reaction, community activity supported by local NGOs, as well as government apparatus, is required. Healthy coordination between local administration and local community/NGOs is required for this. Local NGOs and civic society must seek to instill in society a deep culture of safety and prevention. In a democracy, NGOs, civil society, and the media all play an active role as pressure organizations, allowing any government inaction to be detected and corrected. As a result, the general people and NGOs should keep a careful eye on how the government handles disasters and act as watchdogs. Natural hazards are endemic to our geology, geography, climate, social, and cultural environments, but we can surely endeavor to manage crises more effectively so that dangers do not devolve into disasters. With a well-thought-out crisis management strategy in place, it is conceivable to envision our country, despite its numerous dangers, as a place free of all calamities in the future. The work of announcing a policy, promulgating a law, or establishing an institution in the field of crisis management is relatively simple. The complexity lies in putting policies in place to accomplish the desired goals. Crisis management, a governance issue that is both vital and complex, is at the core of India's administrative system. In order to speed up the administration's emergency reactions and raise the effectiveness of the machinery to handle crisis situations and improve crisis readiness, the system requires innovative thinking and fundamental reforms. To that end, it is critical that the crisis management apparatus perform and deliver. What is required is the introduction of a new paradigm in terms of the quality and efficacy of our institutional capabilities and delivery systems, while also ensuring that they are anchored in both authority structures and accountability procedures. Our goal should not only be to have more efficient governance systems, but also to have innovative ways of capacity building and empowerment of all stakeholders at all levels, including panchayats and the community, strategic applications of science and technology, the establishment of a reliable emergency communication network, the construction of safe homes and infrastructure, and learning from research and development as well as previous experiences with crisis situations. Each of these responsibilities is difficult and necessitates well-thought-out planning and implementation strategy, as well as coordinated efforts from a number of stakeholders both inside and outside the governmental structure. Our goal should be to create synergy and convergence between technological and knowledge-based advances and our diverse socio-cultural practices and indigenous coping mechanisms. The hallmarks of the disaster management method have been systematic preparedness, early warning, swift response, and long-term rehabilitation. Institutional support of science and technology institutions for disaster management. The contributions of numerous research and technology institutions are critical to disaster management. Indeed, advances in science and technology have resulted in significant advancements in disaster management efforts. Because crisis management is multidisciplinary, relevant research is conducted by a variety of sector-specific research and development organizations. The National Disaster Management Authority, with the help of National Institute of Disaster Management, may be able to enable a shared platform between science and technology organizations and users of relevant technologies, according to the Second Administrative Reforms Committee. Such systems could be implemented at both the federal and state levels. 7.8 From disaster to resilience. Disaster resilience has become increasingly important in present times. The community need to be better prepared and equipped, be more resilient and thereby less vulnerable in the wake of disasters. Therefore, all the stakeholders, public, private and the civic sectors need to make efforts to adapt and act effectively in the crisis situation. The following components need to be strengthened: professionalization of disaster management. The lack of properly qualified employees has definitely hampered the country's institutional growth for disaster management. While civil servants and other senior personnel in organizations such as the police, armed forces, and municipal bodies have played a leadership role in the past and will continue to do so in the future, it is past time to pay special attention to the country's long-felt need to professionalize disaster management. The tactics and procedures perfected by various industrialized countries in disaster management are the finest practices, and India can benefit from exposure to these principles. It is, therefore, desirable that the possibility of bilateral agreements with foreign governments for the exchange of experiences and learning from their documentation and research efforts be fully explored. Use of social and mass media. When it comes to crisis awareness, the media plays a critical role. Immediately following a major disaster in any part of the world, communities' curiosity and fear about their own danger are at an all-time high. This is a good time to run public awareness campaigns and use the media to raise awareness about the dangers that the community faces. The only way to achieve this is for the media and the disaster management system to work together. Lessons learned from previous disasters or from disasters in other places could be a useful contribution to such awareness-raising programs. The specifics of all such disasters must be adequately documented and kept in the public domain for this reason. These facts, as well as the lessons learned, should be made available on the websites of the district disaster management authorities, the state disaster management authorities, and the NDMA. Building community resilience. The community is also a reservoir of traditional knowledge and skills, which must be incorporated into the risk reduction process. It is vital to educate the community about disaster risk reduction in general, as well as to impart skills and assign specific duties to community members, in order for the community to be prepared. The first response from the community is a well-coordinated one. Focus on district disaster management plan. The district's hazard, risk, and vulnerability profile need to be discussed by the administration. The district's vulnerability map, as well as the historical profile of major catastrophes that have occurred in the past, their impact on the district, and how the district has dealt with them, should be known to the administration. What is the district's current level of preparedness? Is the district prepared to deal with a calamity if it occurs now? What is the district administration's or DDMA's current capacity for search and rescue, relief distribution, logistics, ensuring lifeline services, providing security and safety to the people, law and order situation, resource mobilization, and so on. All of these inquiries must be answered by the administration. This would provide an indication of the district's capacity as well as a starting point for planning. After that, the administration, or DDMA, consolidates the district's risks and moves the level forward. Fact check on statistics related to natural disasters. On an average, almost 60,000 people die due to natural disasters every year across the globe. On a worldwide level, disasters contribute to 0.1% of deaths over the last 10 years of time. Deaths caused by natural disasters have seen a major decline over the last century, from millions of deaths every year to an average of 60,000 deaths. Poverty-stricken population is the one that is most highly affected by natural disasters, with high number of deaths and property. 7.9 Summary. To sum up what we have learnt in this unit, here is a quick recap. A natural disaster is a major calamity caused by the Earth's natural processes. Natural disasters are sudden, unpredictable, out of control and are intense. The main categories of natural disasters are biological, geophysical, meteorological, hydrological, climatological, and extraterrestrial. Natural disasters are caused by extreme weather conditions or movements of the Earth's surface that tend to be localized in certain areas of the world. The risk perception at the time of disaster is influenced by many factors, which are firstly related to the nature of the hazard itself and secondly to psychological, social, and cultural components and their mutual interactions. The main perspectives on disasters have been as acts of fate / acts of God, acts of nature, joint effects of nature and society, and social constructions. A technological disaster or catastrophe is an event caused by a malfunction of a technological structure and / or some human error in controlling or handling the technology. Technological disasters are especially stressful because they are unpredictable. Individuals, families, and communities are affected. Air pollution is the presence of substances in the atmosphere that are harmful to the health of humans and other living beings or cause damage to the climate or to materials. Air pollution can contribute to annoyance, anxiety, depression, and general dissatisfaction with life. Pollution is also linked to substance abuse, self-harm, suicide, as well as crimes. Significant roles and functions are played by the various levels of government in case of a disaster. There are various committees and ministries that are dedicated towards relief work to manage a natural disaster. As a way forward, it is important to professionalize disaster management, constructively use social media, build a resilient community and focus on district disaster management plan.